Hey guys, this is Crowetic, and I'm here with the well-known Vays. He's
Hey, thank you for having me
someone
on.
who I've always, respected, and I figured to start my new channel here. Why not have someone who I respect to do an interview with? So I brought him on, and he was kind enough to give me some of his time here, and so that's what we're going to do. And basically, first I wanted to start off, and I just want to get a little background on you. I heard that you were a stock trader. How does that compare to Bitcoin trading, and is it similar, that kind of thing?
Well, I not as a profession. I was working on Wall Street, but not in the trading area. I was doing risk analysis, building risk models. Trading was something that's always been my hobby, always been my interest. So when I wasn't working for companies where trading was restricted, I always like had my own portfolio and I traded. And then when I finally left the Wall Street space to join the crypto space, I started trading in the crypto space, Bitcoin and a little bit of altcoins. Realized that that wasn't my thing. So I still do traditional trading, and then I just talk about crypto. And I do talk about the price of Bitcoin often, and I've been very, very good at predicting the price of Bitcoin. But I'm a holder of Bitcoin. I don't trade it. I stick to my trading strategies that I find, more stable, and I do some arbitrage and things like that. I mostly trade in the option space.
Right, awesome. And yeah, that kind of leads into one of the other things that I wanted to talk about a little later, but we'll put that on hold. What about any other investments that you like? Like personally, I have an asset that I based around physical silver. I think that's really a good one to have. What do you think about any other investments?
Uh, these days, not really. I mean, I have physical silver, I have physical gold. Those were like the days when I was still a bit of a gold bug before Bitcoin came in. Now I really do like Bitcoin, and as far as investments, I like having like the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, like a diversified portfolio with the least amount of management as a safety net. Other than that, I trade options, and I mostly do arbitrage and spread trading, which is, keep the risk down to a minimum. I'm not into real estate investing. I'm not into like altcoins. I have a small business, a brick and mortar, which after 3 years is finally picking up. Probably not something I'm ever going to want to do again. My other attempts at investing have never worked out, so I now stick to what I know, and I leave investing to the experts in investing.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I've always enjoyed your technical analysis on trading and things like that. So that's always something that people really like to see. And predictions in Bitcoin price is a hard thing to do. So to be able to be pretty accurate with that is pretty awesome, I think. So I wanted to kind of dig a little bit more into Bitcoin itself now, since we are both into Bitcoin. We both like Bitcoin. First, what is your thought on the recent huge price movement? What do you think is causing that?
Well, you mean the price movement up or
Yeah.
today's minor crash?
Well, no,
You
no.
gotta be more
Overall, in the last
specific.
month, how it's gone, significantly higher than it was before.
Okay, so that one caught many people by surprise because of this controversy over the scaling of Bitcoin. A lot of high-profile people predicted that Bitcoin would drop in price, but instead we continued to go up. And what it reminds me of is the stock market, where people have been calling for a stock market crash for years, and it continues to go up. And then with the Trump selection, it only makes it go up more. So Bitcoin is having the same kind of issue where people were kind of expecting it to fall, but there was nobody left to sell because people have panic sold early this year on two occasions. The first time was when the Chinese regulators showed up at the Chinese exchanges. People panicked and sold. And then later on, when the Bitcoin ETF wasn't approved by the SEC, and that came the same week as the biggest miner in the space, Bitmain, decided to throw support behind Bitcoin Unlimited and big blocks, and that caused huge panic sells. And what I think ended up happening is anyone that was willing to sell had sold, and there was nobody left to sell. Meanwhile, the underlying economy and demand for Bitcoin, because it's actually used in real commerce, continues to rise. Bitcoin continues to be in the news. People are getting more and more interested. And recently, my theory has been that because of all this uncertainty that is coming August 1st with the user-activated soft fork and the potential split in Bitcoin, people are getting scared. And if you've been in Bitcoin for a while, you do trust yourself with the security of the Bitcoin over trusting any kind of an exchange, especially if you were around during the Mt. Gox days, during the Cryptsy days. You've been through the Bitfinex hack, through the Bitstamp hack. You've seen it all. And there is a big event coming that could potentially cause a loss of your Bitcoin if the exchange doesn't handle it correctly. Not to mention in the chaos, there could be double spending and additional hacks. And anyone smart will just take their Bitcoin and store it and secure it themselves. Because if you know what you're doing, you will, and Bitcoin happens to split, which I don't expect it to, and I hope it doesn't. But in case it does, if you protect your Bitcoin yourself, you have it on both chains. So I think that fear has been driving people to take their Bitcoins off of the exchanges, which creates a bit of a contracting supply of Bitcoin sitting on that exchange. And as demand for Bitcoin, whether it's even people with Ethereum cashing it out for Bitcoin, you yourself run a GPU mining farm, right?
Yes, I do.
And or at least you are involved in it in some way, and you sell it for Bitcoin, right? Yes. Pretty much. So there's this, and you're selling it on an exchange for Bitcoin. Obviously, you don't have someone come into your house and exchanging it directly. So because of that, imagine a situation where people are removing their Bitcoin from an exchange in order to protect it and store it themselves, but a miner needs to get the Bitcoin. They're not going to keep a lot of the coins that they're mining. So your demand to get the payout in Bitcoin will drive the price of Bitcoin up because you want that Bitcoin. And I'm sure you're taking it off the exchange immediately, correct?
Yes, I am, of course.
So there you go. So you're basically the typical example of someone that is helping drive the price of Bitcoin up as other people are getting scared and taking liquidity off exchanges.
Absolutely, yeah. And you mentioned the UASF, and that's one of the main topics that I wanted to talk about with you. First of all, can you just give a little rundown of what the UASF is for people that don't know? Nothing really super detailed. And then, give your stance on it so that people know that as well.
Sure. So the UASF stands for the User Activated Soft Fork, which is a fairly, I don't want to say a new idea because it was kind of used once in the past, a long time ago, but recently it's been kind of, not used. Typically, when the core developers are incentivized to upgrade the Bitcoin code in order to make it better, they prefer a method of getting that code onto everyone's systems to use Bitcoin in the least disruptive way. So usually if they are coding some kind of a change, they have already done the analysis that the market and the users want that change. And now the question becomes, what is the least disruptive way of getting that change into the system? So everyone has always been under the impression that a miner activated soft fork has always been the least disruptive way because miners are securing the Bitcoin. They're the ones that are rewarded for Bitcoin, and they're the ones that have to run a Bitcoin node that's economic in nature. And the idea was, well, if miners are in consensus that this change to the code is good, and we know that 80, 90, 95% of miners, the bigger, the more, the better, right? So if all of these miners are on board with it, it becomes the smoothest way ever. We know that people want it because otherwise we would have never programmed it in. If the people would reject it, that would be bad. But if the miners accept the coding change, that would be the most smoothest process ever. What happened with segregated witness, which is, from what I understand from people that know technology way better than me, is it's an amazing piece of code that solves numerous problems in Bitcoin. Some of them bugs, some of them, optimizations, and there was also a scaling component added to Bitcoin that basically, if everyone is using SegWit, it's like we're creating a 4 megabyte block out of a 1 megabyte block because of all the optimization of the data that gets stuffed into the 1 megabyte block. So the core developers were under the full impression that this is the most perfect piece of software. They can do it. The users want it. Everybody wants it. But the miners seem to reject it, and for reasons that to this day seem to be a little unclear to the core developers that spent 2 years working on this code that they thought was going to be the perfect solution. And because the miners have been reluctant to activate it in the safest possible way, the community has basically spoken out, and they said, well, we can have the users activate it as a soft fork. So the users are going to try and, I don't want to say the word force the miners to see the user side of things, but that's probably how the miners see it, because even though the miners are mining these blocks of Bitcoin, they still need to sell this Bitcoin. And this Bitcoin needs to move through the ecosystem, especially the economic nodes. So the economic nodes are corporate nodes like exchanges and businesses. While people like myself, I am running a full node, but it's not really an economic node. I just use it to verify my own transactions, but I don't actually run a business involving my node. So a lot of the people are like me that want SegWit so that Bitcoin can scale and so that it's easier to send transactions and they're cheaper and the system isn't clogged and we can do more than 3 to 4 transactions a second. So the next goal is to get all of these economic nodes on the side of the users, because if that happens, the miners will not be mining the segregated witness coins, and they will have a tough time selling the coins that they're mining, and that's hundreds of millions of dollars of potential waste. We basically want to show the miners that they need to support the users, and they have to basically come to the understanding that the users want segregated witness so that Bitcoin can scale with not only a little bit with itself, but also as second layer solutions that are very difficult right now without segregated witness.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I didn't really even think of it like that. So it's basically trying to influence the miners via, getting as many services as possible to switch over and support SegWit or support BIP 148. And then the miners should follow behind. But what if they don't? What do you think about the guy from Bitmain and what he's has threatened? And what if the miners decide that they don't want to? What happens to this movement then?
We're not sure. So if they decide to really be, I guess, confrontational in this matter. Well, it's actually even a little more complicated than that. The user-activated soft fork will only work if there is a bit of an economic majority going into August 1st. Because if there isn't, then someone like me will probably even pull support. Like, I think that the user-activated soft fork is gaining great momentum right now. I think it's doing good. We have about 6 to 7 more weeks to really get the users and the economic majority on board. If we're unable to do so, it could be safer for the network not to really push it on August 1st, because if it's a dud, then it's no big deal. If it has huge support, then the miners will probably come to our side. But if it's somewhere in between, then the outcome of possibilities becomes huge, and this becomes true game theory as to where you are, as to what you should do. It can be anything from the miners attacking the big mining community that doesn't want to come on, go the SegWit route, can then use some of their mining power to attack the user-activated soft fork side, which could potentially prompt other, I guess, I don't want to use a certain word, other, tough choices that would force the users to now implement things like proof of work and completely change the mining algorithm, so that causing completely two separate Bitcoins that potentially can both survive, or one of them may die out. The other side can preemptively do the same. The other side can create a change. Let's say the big miner Bitmain decides to go the 2 megabyte route and hard fork the legacy chain of Bitcoin that doesn't have SegWit into bigger blocks, making the two chains uncompatible, once again creating two Bitcoins. This is something we all try to avoid. I personally do not want to see two Bitcoins. I think it would create a huge problem in the ecosystem, and I think it has the potential of removing Bitcoin from being considered a store of value, which is something I really like to avoid, not just for personal selfish reasons, is that I consider Bitcoin a huge store of value, which is where most of my value resides, and that would cause me a lot of financial headaches. Right. So that's my selfish reason for wanting to avoid it. But in reality, I think it would be very bad for the future, because I have a hard time explaining Bitcoin right now to people. I will not explain two Bitcoins to people. No. I will just step away.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned the store of value. And to me, I mean, Bitcoin is a store of value right now, right? And, SegWit, it was already adopted on Litecoin. Why does Bitcoin need SegWit too? I mean, why can't Bitcoin just be the gold, and Litecoin can be the everyday transactional type coin, and then we don't run into this? Why does Bitcoin also need SegWit? I guess is my main question.
That's a good question, and here's how I will answer it. Litecoin adopted SegWit, but SegWit was coded by some of the smartest developers in the crypto space, perhaps the only smart developers not the only, but like the top 90% of developers in the crypto space are in Bitcoin, or probably even more than that by percentage. So it was the brain power, and it's like Adam Smith said, right? Like the value of your society is dependent on basically the smart people of your society, right? This is why countries with natural resources like Russia and Venezuela can't do all that much on a global scale, but a country like Japan with almost no natural resources was able to have the second largest economy in the world in the 80s going into the 90s, and they're still number 3, right? So a lot has to do with the brain capacity and the smart people. So it's the smart people of Bitcoin that have prevented Bitcoin from being hacked. It was the Bitcoin core developers that have gotten Bitcoin to this point. And it was their 2 years of work, coding, testing, analyzing, that brought SegWit. And if Litecoin is adopting SegWit and Bitcoin isn't, then Litecoin is using the latest innovation. And if all that work by the smartest people isn't used, why are they here? Why are they in Bitcoin? And if they leave, then Bitcoin loses a huge factor of its trust. Okay, so like it now becomes way more vulnerable to hacks. It becomes way more vulnerable to bugs. Like if the smart people that gave us this great technology, I think I don't want to repeat myself, but that's basically the main reason why Bitcoin has to adopt SegWit. Because otherwise, if the smart people aren't running your development anymore, then what good is it?
Right. Okay. So you see it as you think that the developers would see it as like a shot to the gut, basically. Like, we did all this work, and then the community says no, we're not going to do it. So I mean, they could just go work on Litecoin, right? I mean, but and they don't necessarily have to continue with the SegWit side of things, they could work on something else in Bitcoin, right?
That's a good question you brought up. So one quick correction. So you said the community doesn't want it. That's the thing. The community wants it. It's the miners that are being reluctant.
Yeah, correct.
So all polls, all questions, like you send out a Twitter poll asking you like 80, 90% of all the people polling want SegWit, right? And the users of Bitcoin, the ones that are using it for gray markets or whatever you want to call it, these people don't really vote in those polls, but I know those people are struggling. The fees are getting high, the transactions are being slow, and in a way, our core developers will never admit it, but they fully understand that this is one user base that they also are coding this for. I don't get paid by anyone. I don't have any affiliations, so I can say controversial things, but many people can't say it, right? So your other point is, well, why can't these developers just go to work on Litecoin? That's a twofold problem. So one of them is a lot of these developers have been working on Bitcoin since like 2011. In the early days, some of them even earlier, like some of the guys like Peter, maybe not Peter Todd, but like Matt Carrillo, he was like doing this stuff when he was in high school. Okay, like someone like Peter Todd was doing, I'm not sure early in college, right? So a lot of these developers have literally put their entire life's work into Bitcoin, and if they now switch to Litecoin, and not only will we see them as failures, even though I personally may not, they will see themselves as failures and given up on something great. Right. So for personal reasons, they won't do it. The other reason is, if that happens, if these core developers now move to Litecoin, it's not like switching from MySpace to Facebook, which did not really come with $20 billion of value, losing confidence as a store of value, right? Like I recently got into an argument on Twitter or something, some medium, where I said switching browsers has almost like switching browsers from, let's say, Firefox to to Chrome to whatever, right? I'm like that's simple. I mean, there's no cost. There's almost no cost to that. And I got like huge arguments with people like, what are you talking about? There's a huge cost to switching browsers. I'm like, what? I switched browsers 3 times this year. Firefox started getting annoying. I tried Brave. That didn't work. And I finally, I tried avoiding Chrome for years and years and years, but I'm finally on Chrome because I just didn't like all the spying. But I'm like, no, of course it's simple. I understand people are lazy, but like it's very, very trivial to switch your if you're saving your passwords in your browser, that's just stupid. You're probably doing yourself a favor by switching browsers, but it's very, very trivial to switch your favorite tabs from one to the other. Like switching social networks is a little bit harder because now you got to re-find all of your friends. Switching messaging mediums is also a little tricky. Now you got to get all your friends on a new medium. But nowadays everyone has like every medium. Now it's just a matter of coordination. But like these are trivial things. But switching a store of value is insane, and in my opinion, not doable. So even though all of these smart people will go to Litecoin, if Bitcoin now is no longer seen as a store of value, and I'll take myself, I'm not Bitcoin rich, I'm nowhere near a millionaire, but if I lose 80% of my life savings because the core developers went to Litecoin, why would I trust them? How do I know they're going to stay on Litecoin? What if they're going to, okay, what's next? Dogecoin? Well, what about after that, right? Where are they going to go next?
Well, I mean, it would be basically...
I don't think so. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, it would be basically the miners that were forcing their hands, though. So, I mean, you really think that people would look at it as they abandoned ship? Or, I mean...
Well, it would be a combination. It would be looking at a mining abandoned ship. And then, okay, so what's stopping these miners from then going on to Litecoin and then doing the same thing all over again the next time we need a similar advancement in technology, though I'm not sure anything bigger than SegWit. Like, for example, some people are now saying that the SHA-56, which is the encryption function of Bitcoin, is good for now, but in about 5 to 10 years, it may no longer be very safe. We're going to need to have a serious update to the technology that increases the encryption and safety. And how do we know we're not going to have the same problem? Because some of these miners are now, potentially working for government actors, and this is the last thing they would be interested in doing, upgrading the encryption security of Bitcoin. Like, we want to make sure that, critical changes to the system that 100 decentralized smart people have all approved and tested and retested that this is safe and this is the right path. We need to make sure that this kind of upgrades to the technology enter the system in the safest possible way. And if that can't be done, I'd rather have Bitcoin, destroy itself now than later when it's even more painful.
Right. Okay. And then the one other thing that I was looking at, and it's kind of confusing to me, is what I was seeing is people saying that on August 1st, the nodes will basically be signing transactions with SegWit. And what I recall from the past is that we've got to have the miners signaling for SegWit along with everyone else, and then it becomes active, right? So on August 1st, it's not actually going to be denying transactions, correct?
No. From my understanding, which again, I've been so busy, and I think I have the right understanding, but it's possible I could be corrected. So there's two things. So there is code that has been in the system for a while that everyone expected to pass safely, the miner activated soft fork, where the miners signal for SegWit, and once 95% of miners are signaling for SegWit, and they're signaling 95% consistently for approximately 2 weeks, then it automatically enters the system, and after that point, then they start mining segregated blocks, and any block that isn't a SegWit block gets rejected. And they have until November 15th to get this done. Okay. Because it feels like that will not be reached, the user-activated soft fork does enforce that your block has to be mined as a segregated witness block, not signaling for the segregated witness block. So as of August 1st, there will be miners that will be mining blocks that are mined with segregated witness code. And again, there is multiple issues here. One of them is the blocks being mined by this August 1st code is not directly blessed by the core developers that wrote the code that would be mining the blocks with the 95% miner signaling. So it's like another very competent developer, a Litecoin developer, took that code and hacked it a little bit to accommodate the user-activated soft fork. So this creates a minor problem in that there are businesses that may support this movement of the user-activated soft fork, but because the code wasn't officially blessed by the core developers that they trust, they are a little reluctant in agreeing to this user-activated soft fork. Now, the core developers see this user-activated soft fork on August 1st as a little bit confrontational. So they have not yet blessed the code being used inside of it until they see more community support and more economic nodes like exchanges wanting them to bless this code. So it's a bit chicken and egg, as it's exactly like it sounds, right? So that's one potential issue. The other potential issue is how many miners are actually going to mine this user-activated soft fork as of August 1st. Because if it's only 1 to 2% of all the miners, that itself creates numerous problems. First of all, it becomes insanely difficult to find a block. If 10% of the mining power is mining this on August 1st, then it'll take 10 times longer to find a block. And that's a problem. that means transactions are 10 times slower.
Right, because the difficulty is going to stay the same. So
correct.
Yeah, so the you're going to have a large percentage of the miners to actually make this effect, right?
Right. Now, the difficulty will eventually adjust, but the difficulty will adjust after 2016 blocks, which normally takes about 2 weeks, but under those conditions, it will take 10 times longer.
Right.
Now, here is the minor trick that comes into it, and the reason why the user-activated soft fork was pushed to August 1st is because after it mines 2016 SegWit blocks, the original proposition of November 15th of the 95% compliance still goes into effect. And then the blessed code of SegWit becomes the norm. So we would like that to be one and the same, but what people need to understand is right now the miner activated soft fork relies on 95% signaling.
Right.
With the user activated soft fork relies on 100% SegWit blocks. So by default, they are 95% SegWit signaling because it's more inclusive, right? And that's the goal. So the reason why the date was pushed is because the person that pushed that code that suggested the user-activated soft fork, he did a calculation, I forgot what it was, and he said, you know what, if we get 25% or 30% of mining on the user-activated soft fork, that should be enough time to find 2,000 blocks by November 15th. Okay. And then we officially activate real core developer blessed code into that side of the chain. The other reality is that if we can get 51% of mining on the user-activated soft fork side, that almost becomes a done deal from an economic perspective. Those mining the legacy chain have to switch over, or they will lose all of the work that they're doing.
Right. And at what point do you decide, okay, so say that the Bitmain says, no way, we're not doing anything, we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and they don't get that far, we don't get that far with the UASF. What makes you decide, as you yourself, to then pull support? At what point do you decide to pull support for UASF?
I don't know yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out as well. It's like,
nobody does.
I like the idea, but then, what if these guys just say, because they are huge. They have basically tons and tons of mining power, right? So if they don't decide to do this, they can basically either split the chain or cause a whole tons of chaos, and we all don't want that. So, at what point do we all say, okay, whatever, we just go back to legacy, right?
But on the flip side, on the flip side, right? At what point would a Trump supporter pull his support for Trump because he wasn't going to win, right? Because everyone told him he wasn't going to win. The odds, even 2 days before the election, the odds were 7-1 on Trump losing, right? So at what point do you pull support for something you believe in and something you actually believe that can work? I mean, we're not talking about Gary Johnson and the Libertarian Party winning the election, right? I mean, that one is, you're voting for ideological reasons. And even though right now, I believe maybe only 3 or 4% of the mining is willing to mine the user-activated soft fork, there is a bit of a silent majority, even people like me. I mean, I only bought one miner that it's in the mail, but it's not going to do much, but it'll do something. Other people are buying miners, and there is an incentive not to mine before August 1st, because why do you want to help bring up the difficulty only to make it harder to find your block on a minority chain? And again, it's another chicken and egg. But if you don't put your miner online way in advance, then it looks like there isn't enough support, and hence other people don't want to support. So, I mean, we have all of these like chicken and egg scenarios where at what point do you show your hand and also give the opposition more time to get ready and prepare?
Yeah, it's really kind of a difficult thing, especially when like we could have 20,000 people all buy individual miners, and they're not going to compete with these guys like on a level to where it's going to be something that makes a difference. So it's just so difficult to actually compete. We really just have to get them to agree, or we all kind of just have to come to some agreement here. So yeah.
Yeah, no, they're not. And what makes it worse is all these cloud mining. I mean, if we eliminate all the cloud mining scams from the equation and we only talk about like cloud mining that's actually mining on people's behalf, which I don't encourage and I don't support.
Oh.
Well, I mean, the biggest two I can think of is like Genesis Mining and BitClub. I don't know how they work. I've never considered them. I always tell people not to get into them, but they've been mining for a lot of people, and these are fairly big operations. And but which chain do they mine? I mean, do these people even know what the hell is going on? And now you're leaving your mining operator on your behalf to choose what they're going to do in this mess. And I think that's unfortunate. I think if you're going to mine, either do it yourself or leave it to the professionals, because in the case like the BitClub, which is a pretty big operation, they're buying most of their hardware from Bitmain.
Right.
And they don't want to kill their golden goose either. Mm-hmm. So now they're mining on behalf of users who may not even know. And now BitClub is kind of beholden to their supplier, which is Bitmain, that clearly doesn't want segregated witness for reasons we're probably not going to get into on this podcast.
No, yeah, definitely not. Yeah, it's it's just going to be an interesting situation. I think we can pretty much end it here. I wanted to thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we can talk at other points about other things. All right, thanks, Tom.
No, this has been great. You guys can find me on Twitter, Tone Vays, very easy. My website is called Liberty Life Trail, and one of my more popular YouTube podcasts is called Crypto Scam, where I try to explain what the problems are with a lot of these projects and tokens in the crypto space.
Great. Yeah, we'll check it out. And I'll put links down below on the video too. So if you want to give those all to me, I can put down anything you'd like.
All right. Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, Tom.